Jackson Torres squinted up at the blazing sky, where the twin suns of Cathra hung like molten coins suspended in an unforgiving sea of blue-white. The sand beneath his boots was hot enough to warp the soles, even through 2 layers of protective coating. His environmental suit was built for rugged planetary surveys, but Cathra was testing its limits. Sweat trickled down the side of his face, caught briefly by the edge of his helmet before seeping into the collar of his suit. It was the 3rd time in an hour that the suit's cooling system had warned of rising core temperature. He gave the display panel on his wrist a hard tap, but the red alert symbol didn't vanish. "Thermal readings from Structure 7 are fluctuating again," came a melodic voice through the comm system. "There may be internal chambers we haven't mapped yet." Jackson turned to look across the dunes. Nyxera moved with fluid grace, her tall frame half hidden by the flowing white and indigo robes of her people. The Zahirians had evolved on cold, alpine planets, where their cities clung to sheer cliffs and icy plateaus. Nyxera, like many of her kind, carried herself with a serenity that made her seem ethereal. Only her eyes were visible, striking violet orbs beneath the delicate veil that framed her face. Jackson had learned to read her moods by the way her gaze shifted. Right now, those eyes were focused on the scanning device in her gloved hand, unaware, or pretending not to be aware, of the heat shimmering off his body. He took a deep breath. Even the air tasted hot. "Nyx," he said through the comm, "my cooling system's shot. Both primary and backup are failing." She looked up at once. He caught the brief tightening of her gloved hands around the scanner. "Then we must return to base camp." He shook his head. "We're 6 hours out. In this heat, I won't last 2. She was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, she walked toward him, sand shifting under her boots. When she reached his side, her voice was quiet. "What will you do?" He hesitated. The numbers were clear. His temperature was rising too fast. He was already entering the early stages of heat exhaustion. Dizziness. Sluggish thoughts. A tightness in his chest. "I need to shed layers," he said finally. "Strip down to the base layer. It's breathable. Designed for emergencies like this." She went very still. "You intend to undress? Here." He blinked. "Just the suit. Not naked." But she had turned away, one hand pressed over the veil covering her mouth. "Nyxera?" Her voice trembled. "Among my people, to remove one's coverings in the presence of another, it's not done lightly. It is a bond. An offering of the self." Jackson swallowed hard. "I didn't know." "I swear, Nyx. For humans, it's a survival thing. Not intimate. For us," she said, her voice barely audible, "it is." He could feel the sweat pouring down his spine, the dizziness growing. Time was running out. "Then look away. Please. I need to do this." She nodded stiffly and turned her back. With trembling fingers, Jackson released the clasps on his suit. The outer shell hissed as cooling vapor escaped. He peeled it away, revealing the skin-tight bodysuit beneath. The heat hit him like a wall, but at least now it could evaporate his sweat, give his body a fighting chance. He unzipped the top half of the bodysuit and pushed it down to his waist, exposing his chest to the desert air. Immediately, he felt relief. He glanced at Nyxera. She stood rigid, her back straight. But in the reflective panel of a sensor device nearby, he caught her gaze drifting to him. Her eyes were wide, uncertain. Searching. He turned away, giving her privacy she wasn't affording him. "We should keep moving," he said quietly. "The ridge is only an hour away. Shade and maybe some mineral water deposits." Nyxera nodded once, and they began walking. As they crossed the sun-baked dunes, Jackson kept his breathing even. Every step was deliberate. Slow. His torso gleamed with sweat, the bronzed skin flushed from exposure. Nyxera walked a few paces ahead, navigating by the pulsing display on her handheld scanner. She stumbled twice, catching herself. Her eyes kept flicking back toward him. "You are warm-blooded?" "Yes," he replied. "Human physiology handles temperature extremes better than most. For short bursts, anyway. I have never seen this much skin before." Jackson chuckled dryly. "You should see us at beaches back home." She didn't laugh. Just kept walking. Finally, the ridge came into view, a jagged outcrop of dark stone pushing through the golden sand. They reached it just as the first signs of heatstroke made Jackson's vision shimmer. In the shade, Nyxera pressed her scanner against his arm. "Your core temperature is stabilizing, but still elevated. We must rest." He sank onto a stone ledge and leaned back, exhaling. She stood a few feet away, hands clasped before her. "Thank you," he said. "For not letting me die out there. You saved yourself." He looked up at her. "And nearly offended you in the process." Her gaze softened, ever so slightly. "You did not know. But now you do." He nodded. "Among your people," she said slowly, "is the body sacred?" He considered. "Not in the way you mean. We see it as part of us. But we don't associate modesty with trust. For us, intimacy comes through choice. Through shared experiences." "Choice," she echoed. "We are not given that luxury." "What do you mean?" She looked at him then, fully. "Our partnerships are arranged. Analyzed. Optimized. Algorithms calculate compatibility. Emotions are secondary." He raised his eyebrows. "But you don't seem unfeeling." "We feel," she said quietly. "But we are trained not to show it. To be ruled by logic. Discipline." He nodded, absorbing this. "Then what you saw today," he said, gesturing to his bare chest, "wasn't just skin. It was, against everything you were taught." "Yes. I'm sorry." She was silent. "But I'm not," he added. "If it saved my life. And maybe, helped you see another way." Her eyes met his again. This time, there was something new there. Curiosity. Maybe even wonder. "Perhaps," she said softly. Perhaps it did. By the time the suns dipped lower in the sky, painting the desert in hues of orange and crimson, Jackson had recovered enough to walk. They continued on in silence until they found a narrow crevice in the rock wall that opened into a small cavern. It was cool. Sheltered. Perfect. As they set up the portable heater and unpacked their ration kits, the mood was different. Lighter. Less tense. Jackson caught Nyxera watching him again as he reclined against the stone wall, drinking slowly from his flask. "What is it?" he asked. "Your form," she said after a pause. "It is, unguarded." "You mean vulnerable?" "No, free." He smiled. "Never been called that before." She sat beside him, her robes rustling softly. "In the old stories," she said, "before algorithms ruled us, our ancestors bonded through rituals of unveiling. Not just of the body, but of the soul." Sounds beautiful. It was dangerous. Love usually is. She looked at him sharply. "You believe in that? Love?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "Even if we have to fight for it." She was quiet for a long moment. "Then maybe, I would like to learn." He looked at her, heart thudding. "I can teach you," he said. "And I can teach you what it means to show the soul, not just the skin." "Deal," he whispered. And somewhere, deep within that canyon of stone and sand, under a sky split by twin stars, something began to bloom. Not just survival, not just understanding, but something much rarer. Hope. Night came to the desert like a sigh. Jackson lay on his back, staring at the cavern ceiling as the soft hum of the portable heat source radiated faint warmth through the chill that always followed Cathra's scorching days. Outside, the wind howled softly against the rocks, the sky darkening to a deep indigo hue. Nyxera sat a few feet away, cross-legged and silent, a soft glow from her scanner casting delicate shadows across the cave wall. He watched her in the half-light, trying not to disturb the fragile peace they had built. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance. It was in the way she listened. The careful way she chose her words. And the weight of every breath she shared with him now, deliberate, cautious, as if she was still navigating the meaning of closeness. "Are you cold?" he asked softly. She didn't look up from the scanner. "I am not accustomed to such rapid temperature shifts. But this is tolerable. You can move closer to the heater, you know. I won't bite." Her eyes flicked to him for the briefest moment, then back to the screen. "I know." He hesitated. "You still uncomfortable about what happened today?" This time, she closed the scanner and placed it gently in her lap. For a while, she said nothing. Then she exhaled. "It is not discomfort. It is confusion." He sat up slowly, folding his arms over his knees. "Talk to me. Please." "I am trained to see through patterns," she said, not looking at him. "To interpret glyphs that have not been read in thousands of years. But I do not understand what is happening inside my own mind." Jackson said nothing, letting the silence stretch. "When you removed your suit," Nyxera continued, her voice quieter, "I felt overwhelmed. It was not revulsion. Not even embarrassment. It was as though my instincts ignited all at once. Everything my people have buried, taught us to suppress, came to the surface. Because you thought I was inviting something. Because my body believed you already had." He blinked. "Wow." She tilted her head slightly, confused by the word. "Wow. Sorry. Just trying to process that. I mean, it's intense." "Yes," she agreed dryly. "Intense is an accurate word." He leaned his head against the wall, watching the shadows dance. "And now? How do you feel now?" "Still confused. But less afraid." He smiled at that. She glanced at him again, longer this time. "You asked me to teach you. About my people. I meant it." Nyxera reached for the edge of her veil, fingers brushing the fabric gently. She hesitated, then let her hand fall back into her lap. "Not yet," she whispered. "But soon." Jackson nodded. "No rush. Take your time." Just then, the scanner on the cave floor let out a soft ping. Nyxera picked it up quickly and scanned the display. "What is it?" "A sandstorm," she said. "Large. Moving fast. We have perhaps 15 minutes before it reaches this region." Jackson stood. "Is this cave deep enough to shelter us?" "We will need to seal the entrance with the tarp. The wind will be strong. Visibility outside will be impossible." Working side by side, they secured the mouth of the cave with reinforced fabric and locked the edges with stone anchors. Already, the air outside was growing sharp, the wind howling like a living thing. As the storm hit, it battered the barrier with abrasive force. The cavern shuddered, but held. Inside, Nyxera and Jackson settled back against the stone wall, the world outside reduced to sound and vibration. "Well," Jackson said after a moment. "Guess we're stuck together for a while." "Indeed." She shivered slightly. "Still cold?" "Yes. But I will endure." Jackson looked at her for a moment. Then, without a word, he reached for the discarded upper half of his suit and pulled it back on, sealing it loosely. Nyxera watched him. "You do not need to. The emergency has passed." "Yeah," he said. "But if it helps you relax, it's worth it." Something flickered across her face. "Thank you." She shifted a little closer to the heater, which put her slightly nearer to him. "May I ask you something personal?" she said suddenly. "Sure. Have you ever bonded?" He blinked. "You mean, been in love?" She nodded. "Yeah. Once. A long time ago. It didn't work out. Different goals. Different planets. And yet you still believe in it?" He looked at her carefully. "Especially because it didn't work out. When you lose something real, you know what it's worth." Nixera looked down at her hands. "I have never bonded. Never been chosen." Jackson frowned. "You mean your algorithm never matched you with anyone?" "No, but that is not what I meant. I mean, no one has chosen me, outside of protocol." He leaned forward, trying to catch her gaze. "Nixera. Just being here with you these past weeks. I chose you. Even if I didn't realize it." She blinked quickly. The gesture reminded him of someone overwhelmed by light after too long in darkness. "Why?" He chuckled softly. "Because you see the world like a poem. Even when you pretend it's just data. Because you're brilliant, and strong, and more real than anyone I've met in years. And because, when I thought I might die today, the last thing I wanted to see was your eyes. Not home. Not a goodbye message. Just you." Silence settled again. This time, thick with something neither could name yet. Finally, Nixera shifted, unfastening the outermost clasp of her robe. She pulled the thick hood down, revealing her full head of hair for the first time. It was a deep copper red, coiled in intricate braids along the sides and crown. Jackson's breath caught. "You're stunning." "It is not beauty," she said. "It is honesty. This is a step. Not yet the whole truth. But a beginning." He nodded. "I'll take it." Outside, the storm howled. But inside the cave, where warmth and quiet built a fragile haven, two people leaned closer to something far more powerful than weather. Understanding. Morning came with silence. Jackson woke to the soft sound of Nixera's breath, steady and slow. She had fallen asleep sitting upright beside the wall, her head tilted slightly toward him, the veil around her neck loose from the heat of the cave. The faint glow of dawn crept past the edges of their tarp-covered shelter, painting the stone in pale gold. For a moment, he simply watched her. He'd seen her as a colleague, a companion, an enigma. But now, she was becoming something else. Not just the alien scholar assigned to work with him. She was becoming real in a way that made his chest ache. Tender. Open. He reached slowly for his canteen, careful not to disturb her. The movement caught her attention. Nixera's eyes fluttered open. "You did not sleep," she murmured. "I kept watch," he said softly. "Storms like that sometimes have aftershocks." She sat up straighter, adjusting the folds of her robe with unconscious grace. "You should rest now." "I'm good. Slept a bit earlier." She tilted her head, studying him. "You always sacrifice comfort for others." "Not always. Just when it matters." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she looked toward the tarp. "The storm has passed. We should take readings and evaluate any structural changes near the ruins." He nodded, but his gaze lingered on her face. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated. "Nothing. Just, glad we made it." "So am I." They packed in efficient silence. Once the tarp was stowed and their supplies gathered, they emerged into a transformed world. The dunes had shifted. The sand was sculpted into strange, sweeping arcs by the wind. The air smelled clean, like lightning and minerals. It felt like the beginning of something. As they moved toward the ruins, Jackson kept a careful eye on Nixera. Something about her had changed since last night. She moved with the same precision, the same grace, but her eyes were brighter. her posture less guarded. And occasionally, when she thought he wasn't looking, she glanced at him with a quiet, unreadable expression. By midday, they reached the outer rings of the ancient Zahirian site. Crumbling pillars of dark stone jutted from the sand like jagged teeth. Glyphs marked with age and erosion coiled around the foundations, barely legible beneath layers of dust. Jackson ran his fingers over one such inscription. "These markings," he said, "they're different from the others. Less ornamental. More directive." Nyxera knelt beside him, brushing sand away with careful hands. "Yes. They predate the known epochs. Tribal, perhaps. Likely coded in symbolic layers. Can you read them?" "Some," she admitted. "But not all. I would need time. And context." He smiled. "Then let's give you both." They spent the next hours cataloging, scanning, photographing every surface they could reach. As the heat rose again, Jackson peeled off the top of his suit once more, careful this time to do so slowly, respectfully. Nyxera watched, but did not look away. "Does it still make you uncomfortable?" he asked. She considered. "No, it makes me aware." "Of what?" "That some barriers are chosen. Not imposed." Jackson stepped closer, lowering the scanner in his hand. "Are you saying you're choosing to let them go?" "I am saying," she said quietly, "that I no longer believe they protect me." He reached out, slowly, and touched her gloved hand. She didn't move away. "You're braver than most people I know," he said. "Not brave," she whispered. "Just, tired of pretending." That evening, they made camp at a raised ledge overlooking the ruins. Jackson built a small perimeter of glow markers while Nyxera boiled mineral-rich water over a portable element. The air had cooled, and stars pricked the sky like shards of silver. Jackson sat beside her as she stirred the pot. "I've been thinking," he said. "About something you said. About honesty." She didn't respond immediately. "If I asked to see more," he continued, "not your body. Yourself. Your truths. Would you let me?" Nyxera turned, her face mostly shadow, but her voice steady. "I would. But only if you offer yours first." He nodded. "I used to think love was about shared plans. Comfort. Similar lives. But now, I think it's about someone seeing you when you're not ready. And choosing you anyway." She inhaled slowly. "That is what our old poets believed. Before the logic priests silenced them." He smiled. "Then maybe it's time for new poetry." Nyxera reached up, undoing the clasp at her throat. Slowly, reverently, she lifted the lower half of her veil. Her face was delicate, angular, and expressive in ways he had never imagined. Her lips, soft and gently parted, trembled slightly. She looked at him, unflinching. "This is my truth." He reached out and touched her cheek. "Thank you." Her eyes glistened. And then, quietly, she leaned forward. When they kissed, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, slow, and full of the weight of everything they had built, the pain, the wonder, the rediscovered freedom. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. Some truths didn't need words. Above them, Cathra's twin moons crossed in the sky. And beneath their light, two people continued to peel back their layers, one choice at a time. The following morning, Jackson and Nyxera rose with the light. The ruins bathed in the silver of Cathra's retreating moons and the early warmth of one rising sun. Their camp on the ledge remained quiet as they packed slowly, wordlessly. Something had shifted in the night, a shared weight lifted, a veil removed. Jackson rolled the last of the thermal fabric into its container, then glanced at Nyxera. She was kneeling beside the campfire's ashes, her fingers trailing idly in the sand. "You okay?" he asked. "I am different," she replied without looking up. But not in a way I can yet explain. He sat down beside her. Sometimes change doesn't need to be explained. Sometimes it just needs to be lived. She turned her head toward him, eyes soft. Your species has a strange way of simplifying what is complex. He chuckled. We have to. We make everything else complicated. She gave the smallest smile. I am beginning to find it refreshing. Throughout the day, they worked in tandem, their movements fluid. The ruins grew more intricate the deeper they ventured. A large circular plaza unfolded beneath layers of windswept sand, half-buried inscriptions etched into its black stone. This was a place of ritual, Nyxera said as she stood over the central glyph, her breath catching slightly. The markings indicate it was used for binding ceremonies. Shared revelations. Like marriages, Jackson asked. No, she said. Stronger. Two people offering not just their futures to one another, but their truths. Sounds like what we did last night. Her eyes found his. Yes. But our kind stopped practicing this long ago. The logic priests considered it inefficient. He crouched beside her. Funny how the things they discarded are the ones that make you feel alive. Nyxera ran her hand over the stone. This place remembers. Even if our people do not. Then let's remember it together. By late afternoon, they took shelter beneath a crumbling stone arch as the suns bore down mercilessly. Jackson drank from his canteen, then passed it to Nyxera, who took it with quiet thanks. She had removed the top layers of her robe. For the first time, Jackson saw the way her skin shimmered faintly in the light, a subtle iridescence, like moonlight on water. She noticed his gaze and raised an eyebrow. Do not stare, human. Sorry, he said. You're just stunning. And you are rather bare. He glanced at himself, shirtless again, his skin slick with sweat. Fair point. They both laughed, and the sound carried like music between the stones. May I? Nyxera asked suddenly. He blinked. May you what? Touch you. Skin to skin. To understand. He nodded slowly. Yeah. Of course. Her fingers reached for him gently, resting against his forearm. Her hand was cool against his warmth. She moved her touch upward, to his shoulder, his neck, his cheek. Her expression was one of intense concentration, as if reading a script written on his skin. You carry stories here, she whispered. Scars, he said. Training accidents. A few close calls in the field. And this one, she touched a faint line near his collarbone. Childhood. Tried to ride a hoverbike before I knew how to stop. She smiled softly, then let her fingers fall. Thank you. Anytime you want to know more, just ask. Twilight approached, painting the ruins in deepening hues of gold and shadow. Nyxera stood at the edge of the plaza, wind catching her loosened braids. She looked like she belonged to the ancient world they were uncovering. Jackson approached quietly, then held out his hand. Come with me. Where? Not far. Just trust me. She placed her hand in his. He led her to a sheltered alcove, partially hidden by fallen columns. It was quiet here, still. The wind gentler, the temperature easing into evening cool. Why here? She asked. Because this place feels sacred. Like it saw something important once. I think it deserves to witness something again. She turned to face him fully. What do you want it to witness? He reached out and touched the edges of her veil. You. If you're ready. Nyxera hesitated. Then, slowly, deliberately, she removed it. No veil. No robes. No barriers. And then she stepped forward and touched the clasp of his suit. He nodded, and together they removed what was left between them. Not with haste. Not with hunger. But with reverence. They laid together in the warm hollow of the ancient stones. Every touch was a sentence. Every kiss a confession. There was no shame. No hesitation. Only breath, skin, and meaning. When they moved together, it was with a slow, aching wonder. Their bodies spoke a language they didn't need to translate. When it was done, they didn't move. Nyxera lay curled against Jackson's side, one hand splayed across his chest. "Was that acceptable?" she asked quietly. He laughed, breathless. "It was everything. I have no frame of reference." "Then let me be your first and best benchmark." She smiled against his skin. "You already are." The stars came out slowly. Jackson traced the constellation patterns on Nyxera's arm with his fingertip. "I never imagined this would happen," he admitted. "Nor I. But I'm glad it did." "So am I." She propped herself up on one elbow. "What now?" He looked at her, serious. "I don't want this to be a moment. I want it to be a beginning. My assignment ends soon. I am expected to return to Zahira. Then I'll come with you. If you'll have me." She searched his face. "They will not understand. They may never approve. Then we'll help them understand. By living it." Nyxera kissed him softly. "Yes. Then let us begin." They stayed in the ruins another day. Documenting. Laughing. Touching. Becoming. By the time they started the journey back to base, the bond between them was no longer implied. It was declared. In the language of skin. In the rhythm of breath. In the promise of every look. Jackson had undressed to survive. But in doing so, he had revealed something far more important. And Nyxera had awakened. To love. To choice. To the courage of seeing someone completely, and choosing them anyway. The hike back to base was longer than Jackson remembered. Or maybe it just felt that way because every step away from the ruins meant stepping toward a future neither of them had planned for. The sun blazed overhead, but the heat barely touched him anymore. Not with Nyxera beside him. She walked quietly, but not stiffly. The grace she carried now was softer, less guarded. A fluidity that came from being seen and accepted. They didn't speak often during that first leg of the return, not because there was nothing to say, but because so much had already been said in touch, in gesture, in silence. At midday, they found shelter beneath a rocky ledge and shared water and rations. Nyxera removed her outer robe again, folding it with care. "I used to believe this garment defined me," she said, tracing its edge with her thumb. "That without it, I would be unmoored." Jackson leaned back against the stone. "And now? Now I think it was just a script I memorized. Not the story itself." He offered her a ration bar. "So what is the story now?" She took it from him, fingers brushing his. "Being rewritten." Base camp appeared on the horizon near sundown, its metallic domes catching the light like the shells of buried stars. As they neared, Jackson saw the main antennae spinning, the solar panels pivoting toward the last rays of sun. "This is where the real test begins," he murmured. Nyxera nodded. "We are not required to report personal findings. But we will be seen. We will be scrutinized." Jackson reached for her hand, openly this time. "Then let them look." Commander Vassal met them at the outpost gate. Her stern face didn't soften as she eyed the two of them. "Torres." "Nyxera." "Report." "We encountered structural shifts after the storm," Jackson said. "Discovered new glyphs. Ancient ritual site. Did you recover anything of scientific value?" Nyxera stepped forward. "Not objects. But insights. The rituals documented may predate the logic priests. Suggest a time when emotional truth held value in Zahirian culture." Vassal's gaze flicked between them. "And the two of you?" Jackson kept his voice even. "We've formed a bond. It doesn't affect the mission." "Yet," the commander said flatly. Then after a pause, dismissed. "We'll debrief tomorrow." As they entered the communal quarters, Nyxera let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That went better than expected," Jackson said. "That was better." He grinned. "Trust me. Vassal didn't hit the roof. We're already ahead." The next few days passed in a blur of data uploads, report filings, and quiet dinners eaten in corners of the commissary far from curious eyes. Some whispered. Some stared. But no one openly challenged them. One evening, as they sat outside near the perimeter lights, Nyxera turned to him. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took her hand and placed it against his chest. "Feel that?" She nodded. "That beat stronger than it's been in years. You didn't make me weak. You reminded me what strength is." Her eyes shone. "And if they send you back to Earth?" she asked. "Then I find a way to stay. Or you come with me. Or we find somewhere else entirely. A third option. Something of our own." Their chance came sooner than expected. A representative from the Interspecies Cultural Alliance arrived to evaluate the significance of the ruins. A tall, soft-spoken official named Seelan Var took a particular interest in Nyxera's research. "Your findings," Var said, paging through her notes, "suggest that emotional authenticity was once valued among Zahirians." "Deeply," Nyxera affirmed. "And it can be again. How do you propose to demonstrate that?" Jackson spoke. "Through us. Our bond. Our work. Our willingness to bridge the divide." Var considered them for a long moment. Then smiled faintly. "Perhaps Cathra is not only a place of history. Perhaps it is where something begins." The Alliance approved a new research grant, a cross-cultural expedition to study the emotional histories of older civilizations. Nyxera would lead the research. Jackson would serve as field operations liaison. They weren't assigned together. They chose it. On their final night at base camp, Jackson stood atop the outer wall, looking out at the desert beyond. Nyxera joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Do you think they will ever understand us?" she asked. "Some will. Some won't. But we don't need everyone to approve. Just enough to make a space for us. A space to belong," she whispered. He turned to face her. "We already do. Right here." She leaned into him, and they stood in silence as the stars rose again. Years later, a plaque would be placed in the plaza of the ruins they uncovered. Not a monument. Not a scientific marker. But a line of text from an old Zahirian poem. To bare the skin is to offer the soul. To choose another's truth is the highest form of knowing. Below it, two names. Nyxera of Zahira. Jackson Torres of Earth. Founders of the first interspecies emotional studies initiative. And somewhere in a quiet archive, tucked between ancient texts and restored records, a single file recorded their shared entry. Bonded. By choice. By courage. By love. The end.